Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology, now available at cd-fishing.us or your local CD USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
Welcome to another episode of the February Room. We hope you enjoyed last week's podcast, and if you did, remember to rate, review, and follow. We appreciate your support. Life can be busy. Between relationships, jobs, and those family traditions, it can feel pretty overwhelming sometimes. So as any good therapist would tell you, before you get to the breaking point, you need to find something that keeps you grounded. And for a lot of us, that's including me, that means to get out and go fishing, which is also exactly what my next guest does. Thank you so much for joining me today, John Morris.
Hey, Lauren, thanks so much for having me.
All the way from Texas, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, and all Texans have great fishing stories, and I can't wait to hear yours.
I have several, but the first one that comes to mind, I would say it felt the most earned, was my personal best largemouth bass. And it wasn't actually here in Texas. It was in Tennessee. And it was just trial after trial of, I just bought this new rod and reel. I say just bought it. I bought it like 7 months prior to this fish, and I could not catch a fish on it. I couldn't. It didn't matter what bait I was throwing, anything at all. I just could not catch a fish. I felt like the size of a pea. I was really reconsidering why I was getting into fishing again. And I tied on, this was with traditional gear at the time. I tied on this red and black crankbait that everyone said wouldn't work. And I threw it out, and I wasn't even really paying attention, and ended up smoking this 5.5 pound largemouth. And it was unreal. I can just remember holding both of my hands in that fish's mouth. It was pretty unreal.
You know, when I went bass fishing in Wisconsin, I could not catch one either. And I was totally getting skunked. And what I was doing is I was stripping too fast because I think I was so used to catching pike in these rivers. You have to strip a lot faster. And in the lakes, my neighbor came over. It's like, you need to calm down your stripping. I was like, okay, you have to pop it. Like it was a popper, pop, do a pop. And then I did catch one. And it is, when you catch a largemouth bass, they are pretty insanely beautiful, and their mouths are fun. And the way that they come up and just eat it, you're just like, oh my gosh, it's a beast.
They really are, they're this renowned species, more or less, here in the United States, at least in the southern, portion of it. We love largemouth. But getting into fly fishing, I started to realize it's more than just this quote trophy fish. It's a really beautiful species, and in a lot of different facets. So I've got this really grand respect for a largemouth bass now.
Yeah, no, agreed. I love it. In the very beginning, I was kind of talking about how fly fishing grounds us. And when we had started discussing and learned a little bit more about who you are, fly fishing and fishing in general is a big passion in how it grounds you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into fly fishing and how that became part of your daily routine to ground you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I guess we rewind several years now. It's 2018, and I'm an Army veteran, and I'm coming back from Iraq. And I felt really off kilter. I was really akimbo. I couldn't figure out how or where I really belonged, is what it felt like. It was this, I'm not exactly sure what they call it, but we had this purpose there overseas. It was a very definite purpose. We knew what we were doing. And I think there was like 16 of us total there where we were. And, I come back and I can't find that purpose. So I've got this void missing. And I felt like, I don't know, I wasn't doing. And so I started reading some books. I read the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. I read The Art of War and a lot of these books, and I started to connect with those. And so I was like, man, I need to just go fishing. So I got a license and I went out and I started fishing, and I was like, man, this was it. This is what I was missing. It brought me back to it was this childlike wonder. It wasn't just nostalgia, I guess, but it was just being able to reconnect with nature. And it really brought me that peace I needed. And then I worked with an aviation company, and I spent 2 years in Afghanistan. And coming back from that, I was like, I'm not going to a war zone again. I'm not doing it. It doesn't matter how much money someone gives me or whatever. I need to be home. I need to raise my family, and I need to be a husband. So I quit all that and I came home. And I guess I was home for maybe 2 months, and I found this local fishing group on Facebook, and I met up with them, and one of them was fly fishing. And I was like, man, that's cool. And they're like, yeah, you should really try it. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not quite the river runs through it kind of guy. I like chucking big jigs. I like chucking big jigs on some traditional gear. And they're like, well, you really ought to give it a shot. They're like, you can catch more than just trout on a fly rod. I was like, really? They're like, yeah, you can catch anything on a fly rod. So I was like,
it's
okay.
so true.
I was like, okay. I went to a sports store. I went there and I bought this $45 combo, and it was terrible. Looking back on it, it was the worst $45 you could spend. But it got me on the water, and I quickly lost all 6 of those flies that came with that kit. Every one of them. I was like, okay. Well, anyway, I ended up tying this crappie jig on the end of my line. Way too heavy. I mean, it was like throwing stones. It was like I was trying to Euro nymph this bad boy, and I caught a bass. And I was like, oh man, this is it. I can catch bass on this. This is my calling. I loved it. It was just something therapeutic about it was just the motion of it. It was artistry in motion. It was expression,
So you're self-trained fly angler, like you just went on your own and not really knowing exactly what to do?
I didn't know anything to do. I didn't know how to cast. I didn't know where to get flies. I didn't know who any of these people were in the fly fishing industry or in the world, period. I didn't know anything about fly fishing, but a river runs through it. That's literally it. And that the flies looked cool on hats in the Great Smoky Mountains. Like, that's all I knew.
Oh my gosh, what a great story. And first off, thank you so much for your service. We've had Project Healing Waters have with Blaine Tomlinson. He came on and just kind of discussed about exactly how what you were just saying is purpose. And for Project Healing Waters, a lot of it comes back with people with pretty severe traumatic brain, PTSD, and what they kind of figured out with fly fishing isn't actually like the art of fly fishing, but it's the knots, the fly tying, like all of the small mechanisms that you do on the vise and on the water with the knots is a way of your brain working those small muscles and repairing it. And I can't remember exactly. Blaine said that much better than I did with better terminology. And so I think it's just so wonderful to have, find that purpose. And I can't thank you enough for your service, because as much as you say, thank you, we have no clue. People who aren't in the service know anything that goes on over there. And for you to have that firsthand, really do appreciate all the things that you do to keep us safe.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. When I was much younger, I didn't know how to respond to, people saying that. Just someone saying thank you for your service and what you've done. But as I've gotten older, it's become a lot easier.
It's like takes time to reflect on that, right? Like where you're like, how do I, when you get older and you're kind of able to reflect on your service and the things that you've done, you're like, how do I respond to this? And yeah. So how, I mean, is it easier for you just to accept it, or were you like more hesitant not to want to say, you're welcome?
Yeah, it was hard to answer because when you're around a military base, you hear it a lot. I mean, you hear a lot of things, but
Yeah.
you hear that all the time, especially if you're in uniform. You're out at Walmart, and they encourage you not to be in uniform when you're conducting personal duties. In fact, you're not supposed to be in uniform, but that's life. It's easier to go to the store after wearing a uniform all day and then getting your groceries and then going home and
Right.
showering and eating and all that. It's more convenient. You're not going to take a change of clothes in your car just to go to the grocery store, and everyone still knows you're a soldier or a Marine or airman, or a seaman or anything like that, because your haircut and how you stand, and sometimes they see your dog tags, and everyone knows it
Yeah.
anyway. But you hear it all the time, and it was like clockwork. You could almost see the person about to say it to you. It's like they make eye contact and they're thinking about saying it.
And you're like, what am I going to say?
What am I going to say? Do you say no problem, or do you say you're welcome? And the generation that I fall in, a lot of us, we've strayed away from saying you're welcome. It's like, hey, it's no problem.
Okay. I
Or
was just like, what's now the response?
we say, oh, it's no problem, or it's not an issue. And someone brought that up to me the other day. They're like, why don't you say, you know you're welcome? I was like, well, because I don't think I'm doing you a duty. I just feel like
Okay.
it's something I, as a person, should be doing.
Okay, I never even thought of that. I love that. But like I said, thank you so much. And I think with fly fishing, as we were talking before, you also you use fly tying also on top of fly fishing to kind of keep you grounded. Because, like you said, that story where you just put a new jig or whatever it was on there and then flung it out. But you have some amazing fly tying experience. How did that happen after that day where you're like, okay, I also like now fly tying?
I have been fly tying one day longer than I've been fly fishing, um, or excuse me, one day less. I lost all of those flies. It's a different beast, and I find this really funny. I'm grinning ear to ear telling you this. That fly rod that combo I got didn't come with a leader. So I tied on a pound of 10-pound fluorocarbon just straight to the end of my fly line, and I thought that was the way to do it. I was like, man, all these flies sink. I was really under the impression. I was like, I thought flies floated, man. Like,
I need a bigger fly.
yeah,
I need some foam.
yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, man, maybe I should put this under a bobber, and but I snagged them all on the bottom of this lake I was fishing, so I lost them all. And I was like, okay, I make my own plastics. I own a bait company. I'm going to make my own flies. So, well, Texas being the mecca of fly fishing in the United States, it was just so easy to go to a fly shop and buy materials. Not at all.
I know, I was going to
The,
say.
the closest shop I think is 2.5 hours, and then the closest ones from those are 6.
Oh my gosh.
So, you're looking on Amazon and all these other vendors online. You're like, man, those are really cheap and affordable, but I just don't know that they'll last. So anyway, I get this bait holder hook. It's like a size 6. It's giant, and I crimp the barb on it because I see everyone doing that on all these YouTube flying tutorials. They're like, yeah, make sure you crimp your barb. I was like, okay, I'm crimping my barb. I put it in there, and I'm using like normal thread from a sewing kit. And I have these bench. I have a bench vise, and then 2 C clamps holding a pair of micro needle nose pliers. And I've MacGyvered this setup on the side of my table and I have this bait holder hook in there, and I take some feathers I found off the bank, some fur from one of my cat's toys, and I tie up this monstrosity of a nymph, and then I cover it in Loctite super glue, not like a normal head cement or anything. It's hard as a rock, and I caught fish on it.
Wow.
I was like, this is my calling. This is it, man.
You got the good mojo. I bet you just are like, it kind of goes from your fingers down to the vise. I mean, the fact that you caught like that bass with that amount of heavy line, and I think is pretty good testimony to good mojo going on over there. Tell me a bit more about this, the bait shop or the bait flies that you create. Is that still your number one business?
It's not actually. That's as much as I'd like it to be. That's a dream someday. You know, when I started it up, I had these. I said in the email, you know, dreams of grandeur, because that's what I thought. I was like, man, you know, I'm going to make these baits. I know a couple guys. I'm going to go. You know, I'm going to get in the industry, and someday you're going to see my logo on the Bassmaster stage. You know, because they have all the sponsors back there. That's what I told myself, right? Because you got to dream, and you got to dream big.
Yep.
But, you know, a dream without a plan is just a dream. And that's what I had. So that is, I honestly, I probably give away more stuff than I sell. But it's like we spoke about earlier, it's just a way for me to stay grounded, stay humble, and really just get some of my artistic, I guess, the left side of my brain. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you know? I hear you. And I love it. I mean, Justin, I wish I was better at fly tying. Maybe it's because I just like to be on the water. I have other outlets, but he's always tying flies, and I think it's really fun when you're kind of creating these flies and you're handing them out to your buddies. And I think the biggest reward is when your buddy catches a fish on your fly and is asking for more of those flies. And so it's not always about monetary, you know, greatness. You know, that's when people are enjoying your flies and they're catching fish with them.
And, you know, I agree completely. You know, that's what the whole, so my company's slogan is eating big, right?
I love it.
And the whole story behind that is not a lot of people know, because it's one YouTube video that's like 22 seconds long from a year ago. And that's when I started all this. It's been like 11 months. Next month will be 11 months. And it's just being a part of, it's the potential to be a part of someone's memory.
Yes.
You know, I don't want to be famous. I just want to be remembered.
Yeah, I love that. That is so true. Well, and on top of that, I mean, you also have a podcast called, what is it? Working Class Pod? Is it the?
It's Working Class Fishing.
Yes, I love that name, because I mean, if anything, a lot of people who are in the fishing, who are out there fishing, is probably a lot of the working class, even though getting into fly fishing seems like it's a big, expensive sport to get into in the beginning. But once you get into it, you have those rods, unless you're buying the $45 rod and reel and combination. Tell me a little bit about this podcast. Like, how did it all come together?
I was standing in line at Walmart venting to my friend Brian. Brian's the other host of the podcast. And, you know, anytime I've got a gripe, Brian's pretty much my best friend, and I talk to him about anything. And what I ended up doing is, not to start drama or anything, but
we can start drama. No, I'm just joking. It's okay.
So I messaged a shop here in Texas, and I asked them, I said, hey, what kind of soles do I need in my wading boots to go wade this river and creek by your shop? And I actually found out about that shop from listening to, you know, the deep, dark depths of YouTube's podcast for fly fishing. And I was like, and, you know, they made them out. They said, yeah, just email us, message us on Instagram, call us, do whatever, and we'll get back to you. You know, pretty much they're making it sound like immediately. So a week later, they got back to me, and I was so was really put out with that. I know it's so small in the grand scheme of things. It's like, why,
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to that whole, carry your own weather thing. Don't let other people's, emotions and feelings impact your decisions, emotions and feelings. But I was so put out with it because I was like, man, I really want to take this trip and go fish this, but I don't want to be ice skating all day.
Yeah.
That's not fun. That's not safe for me. So I'm venting to him, and I was like, man, those guys, they really made me mad. And he's like, well, why don't we just make a podcast and we can fill in these gaps of information that people need. And, we were talking about it, and it came together in like 45 minutes. We decided we're doing it. And then I think it was that next 2 weeks we had an outline for the first 10 episodes. And then the whole idea of it is there's this perceived inaccessibility for fishing, especially in the fly fishing domain of it, that if you don't spend $500 on your rod, it's not a good rod, or that people look down on you because you do something a certain way. If you're fishing with a worm and bobber, a lot of times, not a lot of times, but you have those jerks everywhere, but people look down on you and they talk bad to you and they make you feel, like the size of an ant.
Yeah.
But
there's fly shops out there that make you feel uncomfortable when you walk in and you ask about a fly and they say, do you know where you're going? I mean, I've never had that happen before, but
never.
Never. I know. I feel like there's such a mix of, and not saying, because I've had some really wonderful people on the podcast that have shops, but there's definitely shops out there, and it's not, maybe it's a client who's a guide, who's been guiding for 100 days and they just don't even want to deal with any questions. And I think that's, unfortunately, sometimes you deal with kind of grumpy people in the fly shop. I think everyone's had that experience.
That happens. That's just us as humans, though. We're not always 100% every day. And, looking back on the whole, what kind of boots do I need to wear? It's really, it's not important, but What was important to us is letting people know that, you can get into fishing whatever way you want to, and you can do it affordably, and we'll help you through it. If you have a question, ask us. If we don't know, we'll find the information. That was the whole thing. And we have all these pretty amazing people come on and share their stories. And it's been unreal. It's been fantastic.
I feel like you've done a lot during, because how long has the podcast been running for?
2 months.
I mean, I think what's so great about it is that, I think with this whole pandemic that's been going on for the past 2 years, you've created quite an amazing space for yourself with the fly tying, the bait, and now a podcast. I think that's also about just staying grounded. It's like, hey, when things are starting to feel, especially this time, no matter wherever you sit, it's just an uncomfortable place to be, honestly, and it's unknowing. And so you got to figure out what elements you can control. And that's part of probably like going fishing, creating flies or podcasts, and being creative, like these outlets. Because if you don't have these outlets and you kind of keep it inside, it can totally burst at some point. I mean, that's how this podcast came about too, is, we'll probably be 2 years in March. And it was like, hey, everything's locked down. Like, we need to start sharing stories so that way we're still connecting with people, because we're still a society that needs people and communication and stories.
And I agree. I think that was really well said. So many people just felt closed off, and I think a lot of folks still do. Closed off from what they think is, the real world. It's whether it's your fears or your beliefs, whatever's got you inside, but they still need a way to stay in contact with people. And I've got a few other friends that they've got outdoor podcasts and hiking podcasts and stuff, and it seems like it's almost a record on repeat. It's like a lot of us anyway, we needed something to keep us engaged with people. And you just said it so well. It's been so great.
I was going to say, so you're in Texas, and I was like, hey, I'm running a little late on the podcast today. You're like, not a problem. I'm just driving back from fishing. And it seems like this is something that you do on a daily routine, that you squeeze in fishing every day. Can you tell me a little bit about your home waters?
Yeah. So, in regards to, trout, my closest home water is an hour and a half away. It's actually in Arkansas. I live in Northeast Texas, and all my
Wow.
trout fishing, all my trout fishing I drive into Arkansas to do, except when they stock our local pond in December, which will mark my year of fly fishing.
Oh, wow. So not very long.
Yeah, not long at all.
I love it. You've crammed in so much in the past like 2 years. I think it's amazing.
I just fell in love with it. It's hard not to. It's rich in culture, and it's not just here in the United States. It's worldwide.
Yes.
Everyone everywhere has some form of fly fishing. So, but my closest water is probably about, I don't know. There's a lake that has like 10-pound bass in it, like 10 minutes from my house. I have yet to catch one, probably because there's alligator there now. And
oh my gosh, no. Have you ever had an experience with an alligator while fishing?
Not while fishing, no. I have seen some at like Disneyland when I was a kid, or Disney World. I'm not sure which one that is. I saw those, and I've seen them at like aquariums and zoos and stuff, but I've never seen one in person out in the wild, thankfully.
Oh yeah, no. I mean,
I spend most of my time on a river system that's about 15 minutes from the house, and that's where I do most of my fishing, is on that river.
So when you go fishing, will it only be your fly rod, or will you also bring some tackle? Are you kind of like, I'm ambidextrous here, I'll do whatever?
I would say 98% fly fishing only. Majority, literally until yesterday, I hadn't picked up a traditional rod and reel in 8 or 9 months.
Wow, that's just how much fly fishing just turned for you.
It is. It's when I say I fell in love with it, I mean head over heels. I cast every day.
What do you think about it is so much? I mean, what resonates the most with you with fly fishing as opposed to the tackle?
It's gratifying in a lot of different ways. A lot of guys might get upset when I say this, but standard gear is a lot of point and click.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, well, I put my thumb on this spool and I click this button down and I do a rolling motion and I point my rod tip and I look at where I want to cast. And hopefully with enough practice, my bait will go there. And then, but there are some really finite details about, traditional fishing it's very complicated. You can get in depth real quick. You can open up a whole can of worms, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
And those guys that get out there and they do it full time as a job and a career, more power to them, because it's hard. It's really hard to do that. But for me, it was I got pretty decent at it. I could skip jigs under trees, and I could pitch a jig. I fish a lot of jigs, if you can't tell. I can pitch a jig in a coffee can from my doorstep to like the middle of my cul-de-sac.
Nice.
And it's not, I'm not bragging. It's just I fished that way for 27 years. I literally started fishing when I was 2. I'll send you a picture if people want to see it.
Yes.
I'm wearing a diaper with a bottle in my mouth and a fishing pole. And that was my whole life forever, was just fishing. And then, but I'm getting derailed here. But why fly fishing is so gratifying to me is I have to manipulate every action to make that fly do what it needs to do. Mm-hmm. I fish a lot of streamers, and there's a lot of different techniques, like killing your fly and then putting actual slack in your line to make it swing a certain direction in the drift. Yes. There's a lot more to it than just like, oh man, double haul this out there 100 feet and then, just strip it in and you're the best at it. it's a lot of practicing, especially double hauls for me. That's because I fish a lot of different weight rods all the time. I fish from a 4-weight all the way up to a 10-weight.
Right.
And it's very different for each type of fly you're throwing. And when you can get that, even if it's a roll cast with my 4-weight and I'm, sitting there with my hand in my pocket because it's cold, and, it's just that nice, elegant roll cast that doesn't happen very often, by the way.
Yeah.
It is, but it lays out perfect and it presents right. And then bam, it gets slammed. And it's like, because I casted well and I presented that fly like food, I caught that fish.
I love it. What's like the best fly fishing catch that you've had so far that sticks with you?
Man, I have quite a few. I guess I'll give you two.
Yes.
If we've got time for it. The first one is I caught a southern strain Appalachian brook trout.
Oh, beautiful.
And people talk, they're like, whoa, makes it a southern strain? Well, it's the spots on their upper fins that they get in the South. And I guess it's a lot more than just different spots. My buddy Aaron could go in real depth about that, but we hiked what seemed like an eternity up to this waterfall in a national forest I was there with two Tinkara guys, two of my buddies, and we're catching brook trout out of the cleanest water I've ever seen in my life.
Nice.
It was just unreal. That's my most memorable one.
I love that.
But if we were going, just full blown, like what made your heart race the most when you realized what you had on the end was, I've caught a few now, but my biggest trophy long-nosed gar.
Yes, I was waiting for this story.
It was just right over 56 inches.
Oh my gosh. Which, after listening to the podcast with
Ryan King.
Yes. I mean, that is such an incredible to be catching any of those fish. I don't even know how you do it, because long nose, right? King said that they have to snap their head to the side when they eat, and it's almost near impossible. You can't do it in the front. You have to do it. The fly has to be on there, right to the side of them. So
yeah, they snap to the side, and it's like tongs. You pick up this pair of kitchen tongs, and click, click, click. Well, they're gonna grab that. They're gonna snap to the side. Or if it's, right in front of them, they'll take it there too. But traditionally, probably more to the side, like Ryan's saying. And they'll take that bait sideways in their mouth. Well, you'll feel it. You'll actually feel it on your line. It's pressure, and then it's loose. And then it's pressure, and it's loose. And it's pressure, and it's loose. And that's them turning that fly in their mouth.
Did you know what you had on when you had the fish on the line? Could you see it?
So that was, when you tell yourself last cast and then you make 34 more casts. Well, this was my actual last cast of the day. I told myself, I said, this is my last cast. It is really hot out here. My hands are starting to cramp up from, just stripping line.
Yes.
I'm like, my hands are cramping up. My shoulder's starting to hurt. This is my last cast. And I'm literally looking up this rock face that I have to climb to get back up to my truck. And I strip once and I feel the pressure. So when you're gar fishing, Ryan will let you know when you come down, but you have to unlearn a lot of habits that you've built for streamer fishing. Because when a gar takes it, let go of the fly line. You have to let them take it. So I will literally loosen my drag and let them run down the river. And I'll count to, 4 or 5 or 6. And I'll just slowly tighten my drag back up. And then I will set as hard as I can into that fish. I thought I had a small fish because it was barely moving my line when I loosened my drag. Barely moving it. I was like, okay, well, at least it's a fish. I'll take that. I'll take a fish on the last cast. And then, so I tightened my drag down. I got a little bit of slack out of my line and I stripped into it. And I still thought it was small because it was swimming towards me. And then I stripped again, and then it turned, and it took off. And literally, in that amount of time, I was in my backing on my 10 weight. And I was like, this
Were
is
you
a huge
screaming
fish.
or like, what do you do? Like, cause normally when I have a big fish, I'm just really quiet. Like I'm almost like a ghost. Like I'm like trying to get it in. Like, were you just like nervous or screaming or just kind of ghost like?
Had it been like 5 months prior, I would have been hollering. But I'm after the state record, and every time I garfish, I have to keep that in mind because I want to beat Ryan. Ryan's my buddy, but I'm coming for him.
Love it.
And so you keep that in mind and you prepare for that. You prepare for that big fish. So it's exciting, but you have to hit that checklist in your mind. You have to say, okay, the fish is on. I have to have a witness. I have to have a witness. So I'm hollering at this guy down the bank. I'm like, hey. He's not even looking up. So I get louder and louder, and he looks at me. It's like, if I land this fish, I need you to be my witness. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then the fish came up and he saw it. He starts cussing. He's like, get that fish. Get that fish. And anyway, so I'm running down the bank towards him because the fish is going the other way, and I've got to keep tension on my fly line. This is where I start to lose my composure a little bit because, like I said, I'm standing on rocks.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm wearing my cowboy boots, and I'm trying not to die running up these rocks.
You're wearing cowboy boots while fishing?
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, we got a lot of snakes around here, and I ain't trying to mess with no snakes in my slip-ons or my wading sheets.
That reminds me of, what is it, Toy Story? There's a snake in my boots. Anyways.
Yeah, that's why Woody is the exact reason why I'm trying not to have a snake in my boot.
There you go. Okay, this is so funny. Okay, continue.
So I finally get it up on the bank. All right, here's lesson 2 from John Morris, the most unexperienced gar angler in the world. When you get the fish on the bank, you get ready for it to rip off again because it is not ready to come in. Your first time getting a gar in, it is not ready. I have lost so many giant fish at the bank because I think it's ready and I'll start reaching down to grab its nose and it'll take right back off. And because you don't have as much line to get that rod flex, it'll just take your whole leader. I literally had one take my nail knot and rip the PVC off my fly line.
Oh my gosh, that is insane.
That was on an 8-weight, by the way.
Oh my
God.
So
8-weight fly line, and then my whole gar leader. Anyway, so then we really see it, and I'm white knuckled. I'm telling this guy beside me, I'm like, hey, this might be the state record. This literally might be the state record fish. And this whole fight took about 35 minutes.
Oh my gosh, were you just exhausted?
I didn't realize how tired I was until afterwards because of that adrenaline just pumping. I was like, we got it in and we got it on the bank. And the first thing I did is I dumped my whole bag out on the ground. And I'll send you this exact picture. I dumped my whole bag out on the ground. My tape measures, my leaders, my flies, my water bottles, bug spray, all that. Everything's on the ground so I can get my tape measure. So I'm grabbing this 25, 30-pound fish by the nose. And I'm ripping my fly out of its teeth because my first thing is fish safety. I have to get this fish safely released back in the water. That's my first priority. So I don't care if it ruins my fly. I don't care if it ruins my gear. Oh. I'm going to get this fly out of this fish's mouth. So I remove the fly. I grab one end of the tape measure and I throw the other end to the other guy. And I'm like, I'm going to stay at the mouth because I've got gloves and you measure it. And he measured it and he didn't pinch the tail, and I ain't knocking the guy, but he didn't pinch the tail to get the absolute official length. But I know it was 5/16 away from being 57 inches.
No. Oh my gosh. And then what happened after that? Like once you got did you take a picture?
I because it was the biggest I had caught, normally I would just release.
Yeah.
But since it was my new biggest fish, I was like, hey man, grab a picture real quick and then I'm going to get this back in the water. So he pulled out his phone, he took a picture for me, he texted it to me, and before he ever even finished sending the message, I had already put that fish back in the water.
Okay. Because how old do you think that fish was? Because, I mean, like you said, Ryan King, he said like a big fish like that could be like 60 years old or something like that.
To be honest, I don't have an exact age. I'd have to get with Ryan.
Yeah.
But it's a very old fish. That fish is much older than I am. And it was so gorgeous. When I picked it up, that's when I could tell I was tired.
Yeah, that's when you're like, oh, when the adrenaline wears down and all of a sudden you're like there. Were you nervous when you looked at your pack and maybe thought maybe there's a rattlesnake in there? I couldn't do that. That's where I'd be nervous. I'd be like looking at my pack and thinking maybe the rattlesnake went in there. But what an amazing feat.
Thank you. It was unreal. It was funny. It was nerve-wracking, and it was really gratifying.
Now, is that your go-to fish? Is that the fish that, like, when you think about what you love, why you love fly fishing, is it the gar, or is it the bass, or is it the trout?
I have an adoration for every species, and I don't say that very nonchalantly. I really do. There's not a fish I don't like, except for Asian carp.
Yeah.
That is the only fish I do not like at all, and that's because they are absolutely ruining our waterways.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. There's some people who love carp fishing. I haven't gotten into it. But yeah, I remember Ryan King was talking about that, how the system, there's just so many Asian carp.
Yeah, so the carp we see on let's say Instagram or other forms of social media, those are a lot of mirror carp and common carp and grass carp. Those are cool. But Asian carp are an incredibly prolific invasive species. They're growing at a rate of almost double the normal fish. So what a lot of these fisheries have done is they started stocking these behemoth catfish in their lakes in hopes that the catfish can eat the carp. But the issue is the carp get too big for the catfish to eat them. And it's really bad. I've got some acquaintances, I wouldn't say friends. They're good dudes, but they've done a lot of studies on the Asian carp, and they're doing a lot of work. It's actually a commercial fishing industry now. If you see like silverback or silverfish and stuff like that in your markets, some of that is Asian carp.
Really? I had no idea.
People don't know that, and they're eating it, and they're like, well, tilapia is so much better.
Oh gosh, tilapia.
And it's like, well, tilapia is a bottom eating fish also, because people are like, man, I'd never eat Asian carp. but they'll go fry up some tilapia, and it's like, man.
Oh my gosh. I worked for outdoor hunting, fishing show, and it was a chef, Scott Lasath. And anyways, he always told me, I was like, what would you say you should not eat? And the premise of that show was that you eat weird stuff like squirrel, beaver. And he's like, tilapia. I would never, ever eat tilapia. Like, don't go to the grocery store and buy tilapia. And so that has always resonated with me. Anytime I think about going to a restaurant, if I see tilapia, I'm like, I think of Scott Lasath telling me how gross those fish are on the bottom. They're, like you said, they're bottom feeders, and they eat the grossest amount of stuff. And that's what's going in your body.
They do.
So don't eat tilapia.
That is.
So we were just saying, so you've already accomplished going fishing an hour and a half away. And then tonight, though, you are going to be going fishing just a few minutes away from your home?
Yeah, I'm going to be hitting the river, one of the rivers here, in pursuit of that new record.
So, John, if people are wanting to see your work with the fly tying, the bait, and also learn more about the Working Class Fishing Podcast, what's the best way of them keeping up with you?
Well, honestly, the best way to probably get a hold of me is Instagram. It's the most easily accessible. you can find all the links for associated, working class fishing's there. Everything's just there. If you search for me at Morris and Son Custom Baits, you can find me there. And feel free to shoot me a message, or if you want my email, I can give you any of that. I'm a pretty easygoing guy.
And then when does the Working Class Fishing Podcast, like how often does that air? How can they follow?
So, as the name kind of goes, we are both working class gents that run it. So we've got a balanced life in the mix of fishing and the podcast. We do have a couple guests lined up.
Awesome.
But the salmon run is going on for Brian right now.
I see.
And he's pretty locked in on that. So it'll probably be a little bit before we get our next guest on.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com, where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.